I mean, looking at the aerial views, that building would be like the #1 spot for a sniper. If you were
Yeah.
to pick, like, what's your favorite spot? That building. The
You're
roof of
right.
that building would be #1.
That would have been
Bingo.
the start. But these are rough people.
Yeah.
These are criminals that make our criminals look like nice people. And it's horrible what they're doing. And she's in charge of it because, now she's trying to say
Sure.
she had nothing to do with it. And she's such a liar because
Yes.
she was called the border czar the first
Liar.
day. And it was on the headlines of every newspaper. She's the border czar.
It
And I
was.
say, if you're a Jewish person or if you believe in Israel, if you're a person that, is a very pro-Israel,
Is he going to say
if
it?
you vote for her, it's worse than Biden, and Biden was bad. But if you vote for her, you ought to have your head examined. And you see tonight, I mean, as we're doing this,
Your actions after that assassination attempt were inspiring. You, instead of shying away from things, instead of ducking down, you were pumping your fist in the air and saying, fight, fight, fight. The president of the United States represents America. And I
Yes.
think that is America. That is strength under fire. And so that's, part of the reason why I was excited to endorse you as the president of the United States for having another term here. That was just incredibly inspiring. But what was it like for you?
not pleasant, I have to
Not
be honest.
pleasant.
I said there was blood. I had
Being
more
shot is
blood.
not
I didn't
much
know
fun.
I didn't know I had that much blood. The doctors later told me that the ear is a place that is a very bloody place if you're going to get hit. But in this case, it was probably the best alternative you could even think about because it went at the right angle. And I guess you would say surreal, but it wasn't surreal. I was telling somebody you have instances like this or like a lot less than this where you feel it's a surreal situation. And I never felt that way. I knew immediately that it was a bullet. I knew immediately that it was at the ear.
Yeah.
And because it hit very hard, but hit the ear. And I also heard people shout, bullets, bullets, get down. I moved down pretty nicely, pretty quickly. And
Yeah.
we had bullets flying right over my head after I went down. So I'm glad I went down. The bigger miracle was that I was looking in the exact direction of the shooter. It hit me at an angle that was far less destructive than any other angle. So that was the miracle. For those
Split
people that
second.
don't believe in God, I think we got to all start thinking about that. I'm a believer. Now I'm more of a believer, I think. And a lot of people have said that to me. A lot of great people have said that to me, actually. But it was amazing that I happened to be turned just at that perfect
Yeah.
angle. And all
Miracle.
because I put down a chart on
Divine.
immigration that showed that the numbers were so great. I love that chart even
I mean,
more
maybe
now.
it's a
than I was
sign.
before.
You highlighted a serious issue, and
Yeah.
at that moment, I mean,
Well, the amazing thing is that bring down that sign on immigration, and it was literally about an eighth of a second where it would be good, and after that, it was going to
Yeah.
be a disaster, no matter which way you were facing. But it just had that perfect angle, which was exactly at this shooter. Very sad situation. Such a sad situation. As you know, we lost somebody that was great, Corey,
Yeah.
who firefighter, a great gentleman, a great trumper. He was just a fantastic family and a fantastic man. And a friend of mine came up, Elon, and said, I'd like to give the family some kind of help. And I said, all right, that's great. He said, do you mind? I said, I don't mind at all. And he wrote out a check for $1 million, gave it to the wife. And she said, this is really nice, but I'd rather have my husband back, which is
Ugh.
a nice thing for
Sure.
somebody to say, to be honest. She's great. The family is great. And we raised a lot of
Yeah.
money for them and for two other gentlemen who were unbelievable people also. They were hit really badly. They thought they were not going to make it, and they did. The doctors in the Butler area, I tell you, they were incredible. They saved the two, and they were really hit tough, both of them, equally.
Yeah.
My first question was because I heard bullets flying over me, and I said, how many people were killed? Because we had a massive crowd there, a tremendous thousands and thousands of people, and there was no land. I mean, it was all people. So I said, how many people have been killed? Because I knew there were other shots being fired. And they said, we don't know yet, but some people have been badly hurt. And I have to give the Secret Service sniper, they call him, or sharpshooter, but sniper,
Yeah.
because he didn't know there was a problem. He's an extraordinary shot, obviously, and he didn't know there was a problem. And he was
Yeah.
able to pick it all out within 5 seconds. And he used one bullet from very far away, I guess probably about 400 yards. The shooter was 130, but he was on the opposite side of the field and the podium. And he saw the smoke and the flame from the gun, immediately recognized it, and immediately took a shot. And it was one perfect shot from very far away. And if he didn't do
Yeah.
that, a lot more people could have been
Sure.
badly hurt and killed. So
Yeah,
I have to
absolutely.
take my hat off to him because that's also a surreal. He's been with them for 23 years and
Yeah.
he's never had anything like this. And all of a sudden he has to act. And it's a very tough thing to act and to be shooting somebody. But he saw the gun, saw the smoke, saw the flame from the gun very far away. Obviously has very good eyes. He's got very very good vision, which I assume you have
Yeah,
to have in that particular work. But he took
absolutely.
aim very quickly, and they say it was approximately 5 seconds from long range,
Yeah,
one bullet. If that didn't happen,
yeah,
because the shooter had a lot of bullets, he had a lot of cartridges up
sure.
there with him.
He was very competent in taking that shot to stop the attempted assassination. I mean, there does seem to be some pretty significant failings elsewhere in the system. Like, there's just no way that, like, how on earth does a shooter get on a roof 130 yards away? That seems crazy. People are wondering how on earth could such a thing happen?
Well, I view it as two ways. There should have been nobody on the roof. There were people,
Yeah,
because there were so many tens of thousands of people there. There were people that were seeing him. And there was one woman with a red shirt and
right.
Trump all over it. And she's screaming, that guy's got a gun. You saw it probably.
That does seem
Yeah,
crazy.
well, they're going to learn from this. The communication between the local police, who sort of had an idea, and then ultimately a man lifted himself up to the roof, could barely do it because he was pulling himself up, and
Yeah,
he saw the man with the gun. The man with the gun pointed the gun at him. He thought he was probably going to get shot, but he was like pulling himself up, and because of that, he couldn't get to his gun, and he fell down. Actually, very badly hurt his leg, his ankle. I hear very badly, but
okay.
he fell down, and he did. From what I understand, he did say there's a guy up there with a gun, and the shooting started very quickly after that. I think it forced the shooter to go maybe quicker. He was supposed to be a very good shot.
Yeah,
My sons, Don and Eric, they can't believe what happened, but they said from 130 yards, a bad shot would hit that target almost every time. They said it's like in golf,
yeah.
sinking a 2-foot putt. It's not a long shot.
It was a miracle.
The Secret Service person had the long shot. He had triple the
Yeah,
distance, actually. It's hard. I have to say this about the Secret Service. When I went down, I think they're screaming, but other people also, because people saw this happen. You had so many people. One of the miracles was that nobody ran. I mean, if a gun goes off, the crowd
yeah,
control people showed us this. When guns go off, and it does happen in stadiums at a soccer match or some kind of a match, everybody flees. They call it a stampede, like cattle, but everybody, and a lot of
yeah,
people get killed with those stampedes. We had
sure.
more people than you'd have at, some of these matches or these games, and nobody left. You had a small group behind us in the grandstand, and that was full, and you look at it as it was taking place, and normally they'd be running. They didn't leave. They saw that I was hurt. They saw a lot of blood, and they saw that I went down, and it's almost like they wanted to be with me. Well, out front, you had tens of thousands of people. As far as the eye could see, you had people in Butler, as far as the eye could see, and a lot of press, too. There were, many cameras on watching this. It's what makes it so different, because normally things happen that aren't good, but you never have a picture of it. Here we have all these cameras shooting it, sort of amazing. But one of the interesting things was that you didn't have anybody flee. You didn't have anybody stampede.
Sure.
Nobody. And there were some people behind me, they stood up and they're looking like, I'll tell you,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
want to have them in a foxhole with you. I want to meet some of those people
Sure,
because
sure.
it's so different from what you heard. But so
They were
so I was
following your
down, but
lead.
the Secret Service
Yeah,
guys, there were bullets flying right over my head. You could hear them go whizzing.
yeah.
And these guys came jumping on top of me, and a young lady, Kate, would jump. They moved so fast. And let me tell you,
Kate.
that took tremendous courage. Now, there was a lack of coordination. There was, obviously everybody understands that that building should have been covered.
I mean, looking at the aerial views, that building would be like the number one spot for a sniper. If you were to
Yeah.
pick, like, what's your favorite spot, that building, the
You're
roof of
right.
that building would be number one.
That would have been the
Bingo.
start. You know what people think
Yeah,
is when the local policeman, who, by the way, he did what he was supposed to do. He couldn't hold on any longer. And then when he got
yeah,
his head just peeking above, this guy standing there with a gun at his head. And when he fell down, again, hurt his ankle very badly, but he was making the calls. But what happened is the firing took place very soon. So what they
yeah.
think is that this guy ran to his site, which he had all planned out with the gun. He ran to the site and he started shooting fast. And maybe he sort of missed.
But
He
as you
got
said,
me, but
I
it
mean,
could have been a
yeah.
much bigger problem.
But he totally would have hit if you hadn't turned your head. So, like, it was a very near
It
thing.
was a
So,
miracle. If I hadn't
um,
turned my
It was a
head,
miracle.
yeah,
I would not be talking to you right
Yeah.
now. But it was, it was a very terrible experience. But I wanted to get up. I said, I want to get up. And they have everything there. They wanted stretcher. I didn't like the stretcher. And I knew I was hit in the ear, but I knew I wasn't hit anywhere else. They felt I was hit someplace else
yeah.
because it was such a lot of blood. And they were sure that I was hit someplace else. And they were saying, sir, you were hit in more than the ear. I said, nope, I was hit in the ear. I want to get up. Let me get up. And so I got up, and the crowd didn't know what to think. I mean, this was so many people. You could see they were confused. They didn't know what to think. And I wanted to let them know I was
They followed
okay.
your
It
lead.
was very important for me to let them
Yeah.
know that. And they went wild. They didn't go wild when I
Yeah.
got up because they didn't know, was I alive? You really couldn't tell. When I stood up before the fist in the air. They didn't know if I was alive. Nobody did. And when I put the fist up, they were just relieved and happy and thrilled, and the place went crazy.
Well, I mean, speaking of the sort of slide that got you to turn, that saved your life, really, was the illegal immigration
Right.
slide. It
You're
saved your
right.
life,
No, the
basically.
illegal immigration saved my life. You're right, but it was, I
I
had to
know
be at
that's
that
the.
exact angle.
I mean, that's a great one. Saved by illegal
You know,
immigration.
the
I love
incredible
that.
thing, though, when you talk about the odds, you had to be exactly at that angle. But the incredible
Yeah,
thing is that the chart, I used it less than 20% of the time. It was just a moment.
yeah,
It's always on my left, never my right. And it's always at the end of the speech. So here
yeah,
we have it. It's on the right, not the left. At the beginning, not the end. And even the people that put it up, they were unprepared. And they did a great job. They got it up immediately, fortunately. But I looked to the right, and the bullet came whizzing by, hitting my ear. So it was amazing. But when you think of the odds of that, and
yeah,
that normally you wouldn't use it, normally I wouldn't have the thing, and then it would
yeah.
have been a very different story. It's very much, I say, an act of God. It's a miracle that it happened, and I'm
Sure.
honored by it.
Would it be accurate to say that you're supportive of legal immigration, but we obviously need to shut down illegal immigration, especially unvetted illegal
Yes.
immigration? And that's not the same as saying that everyone who's an illegal immigrant is bad. In fact, I think most people who are illegal immigrants are actually good, but you can't tell the difference unless there's a solid vetting of who comes across the border. Does that accurately
100%.
represent your position?
I say it
Okay.
very simply. They have to come in legally. They have to be checked.
Yeah.
Because look, Kamala was the border czar. Now she's denying it. Everything that I do, she's
Yeah.
saying she was strong on the border. We're going to be strong. Well, she doesn't have to say it. She could close it up right now. They could do things right now. It's horrible. No tax on tips. And all of a sudden she's making a speech and there will be no tax on tips. I said that months ago. And by the way, they had just the opposite. They had not only tax on tips, but they hired 88,000 IRS agents, and many of them were assigned to go get waitresses and caddies and all of this on tips. They have a policy. They had a policy that they were really going to go after you and were really harassing people horribly. And then all of a sudden, for politics, she comes out with what I said, which I think is terrible. And I think it's also hitting them very hard. These people are fake. Now they're also saying they did a good job in the border. We had the worst numbers in the history of the world, not of our country. There's never been a country in history that has had a catastrophe like this. We've had, I believe, and I think you believe this too, you hear 12
Yeah.
million, 13. I believe it's over 20 million people came into our country,
Yeah.
many coming from jails, from prisons, from mental institutions, or a bigger version of that is
Yeah.
insane asylums, and many are terrorists. And I'll tell you what, they're coming not just from South America, they're coming from Africa, they're coming from all over the world. They're coming from Asia, they're
Yeah.
coming from the Middle East, they're coming from countries that are stupidly and horribly bombing Israel October 7th. They're coming from all over the world. It's so sad, October 7th, because it should have never happened.
Yeah.
It's so sad when
Sure.
you look at Ukraine. It should have never happened. We have a defective
Yeah.
government. These are defective people, and they're not people that should be running it. But where you see it the best is the border, because you have millions of people coming in a month, and then she gets up and she tries to pretend like she's going to do something. She had 3.5 years. And by the way, they have another 5 months that they can do something, but they
Yeah.
won't do anything. It's all talk. She's
No.
incompetent and he's incompetent. And frankly, I think that she's more incompetent than he is. And that's saying something, because he's not too good.
Yeah, it is essential to have a secure border. You're really not a country unless you have a
Correct.
secure border.
And secure elections, too.
Absolutely secure elections. And so it's just essential to have a real border or we can't function as a country. Our essential services are being overwhelmed in a lot of cities. And as we were talking about earlier, I think having a legal immigration process that is smooth and efficient and done well, speaking as someone who is a legal immigrant, like one way to think of it is who do you want on your team? Who do you want on Team America? And I think
Great
we want to
question.
just say, okay, we want to let in people who are going to, be great contributors to our society and to our economy.
Right.
And who do you want on the team? And it's not to say that, in my opinion, actually, I'd say like probably most of the illegal immigrants actually are actually good, hardworking people. That's my opinion. I don't understand what's taken them so long to get here. Why aren't more people who have a career in, bad things
Yeah, it's
coming
open
here
season here.
sooner? I mean, it's a piece of cake to go rob,
Get out of jail.
houses in LA or New York compared to other parts of the world.
Kamala will
And
fundraise for your bail money.
in a lot of places in America, if you try to stop the person who's robbing you, you'll be arrested.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's insane.
It's right. I mean, what's happening with crime, and our police are so good, but they're not allowed to do their job. But I have to tell you, Elon, I
They're
hate
not.
to say it because it's such a downer to say it. I hate to say it. I hate it. But you have a lot of people that just shouldn't be. I think it's a much bigger number than you think. They're
I
allowing,
think you're
again,
right.
they're
Yeah.
allowing people from their jails. And if you were running one of these countries where they're coming from, you would have had all of them. As an example, Venezuela, their crime is down 72%. They're taking their drug dealers. They're taking, frankly, their prisoners. They're emptying out their prisons. They're taking their criminals, their murderers, their
Ship them in.
rapists. They're
Yeah.
delivering them into
But
the.
that's what Castro did
Yeah,
that,
well, he did on a much smaller scale.
yeah.
It was a much smaller
Yeah.
scale. But this is a massive scale because this is being done worldwide. But here's what's happening. Crime all over the world is down. And wait till you see the numbers that we have. This is migrant crime. This is crime that's going to be.
Yeah.
And I saw it today in New York where somebody was knifed with raped the girlfriend of a man that stood there watching in New York in one of the
Ugh.
shelters and started
Sure.
pulling out the knives, and bad things happen today. But this is happening every day. These are rough people. These are people that are in jail for
Yeah.
murder and all sorts of things, and they're releasing them into our country, and they're telling them, if you come back, we're going to kill you. We're going to give you the death penalty or kill you. So they don't want to come back. But these are rough people.
Yeah.
These are criminals that make our criminals look like nice people, and it's horrible what they're doing. And she's in charge of it because, now she's trying to say she
Sure.
had nothing to do with it, and she's such a liar because
Yes.
she was called the border czar the first
Liar.
day, and it was on the headlines of every newspaper. She's the border czar, and she never even went there. She went to one location which had nothing to do with the problem is, she went in and out, I
Right.
guess, because she was getting a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
had nothing to do with the problem
Yeah.
is. But she was the
Well.
border czar, and people
Yeah. Yeah.
can't allow them to get away with their disinformation campaign. Now she's trying to say that she wasn't really involved, and the whole thing is horrible. She was totally in charge. She could have shut the border down without him. He didn't know what he was doing anyway, so he wouldn't have even known
Yeah.
what happened. You could shut the border down. He
Yeah.
wouldn't even know the difference. But the fact is that she was border czar. But if you don't have to call her
Yes.
that, the fact is you could just call her. She was in charge of the border, and the border was the worst
Right.
ever.
It's simply not working.
No, it's
I mean,
horrible.
whether it's a question of intention or competence, either way, we don't have a secure border, and we have people streaming over like it looks like a World War Z zombie apocalypse. Is this made up or real? And I'm just seeing people stream across the border, and I have to say, at least the people that I saw did not look friendly. So
These are people that Elon would not be the same man if he had to walk across the street and look these people in the eye. These are rough people. These are really rough people coming across. And I know rough people. And these are people that we don't want in our country. And, the caravans are coming in. And who's doing this are the heads of the countries. And you would be doing
yeah.
it, and so would I. And everyone would say, oh, what a terrible thing to say. The fact is, it's brilliant for them because they're taking all of their bad people, really bad people. And I hate to say this, the reason the numbers are much bigger than you would think is they're also taking their non-productive people. Now, these aren't people that will kill you. We have enough of them. But these are people that are non-productive, just non-productive. I mean, for whatever reason, they're not
Yeah. Yeah.
workers or they don't want to work or whatever. And these countries are getting rid of non-productive people in the caravans in many cases. And they're also getting rid of their murderers and their drug dealers and the people that are
Yeah.
really brutal people. And they're coming into our country
Yeah.
at levels that have never been seen before. And I saw an ad just before I got on the air. I'm walking over here and I saw an ad by Kamala saying how she is going to provide border security. Where has she been for 3.5 years? All the stuff that you're seeing now, all the horror that you look at Israel, they're all waiting for an attack from Iran. Iran would not be attacking, believe me. When I was there, and I say it with respect because I think we would have been good with Iran. I don't want to do anything bad to Iran, but they knew not to mess around. Iran was broke because I told China, if you buy from Iran oil, it's all about the oil. That's where the money is. But if you buy oil from Iran, you're not going to do any business with the United States. And I meant it. And they said, we'll
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah.
They didn't buy oil. Other countries, likewise.
Sure.
You want to buy, you're not doing business with the United States. They were at a point where they had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for any of these instruments of terror. And it was amazing. In fact, there were articles when I was leaving, which is hard to believe, actually, especially when you look at what's happened to our country. Our country is so bad right now. It's such a different place. We were respected. Think of it. 4 years ago, we were so respected to a point where when I said don't buy oil, they didn't buy oil. But they had no money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Israel would have never been attacked. Zero chance. And again, I said to Vladimir Putin, I say, don't do it. You can't do it, Vladimir. You do it, it's going to be a bad day. You cannot do it. And I told him things that what I do. And he said, no way. And I said, way. And it's the last time we ever had the conversation. He would never have done. I got along
Nothing
well with
happened.
him. I hope to get along well with him again. Getting along well with them is a good thing, not a bad thing. I got along well with
Yeah.
Kim Jong-un. When I met with President Obama just before entering, it's a sort of a ritual. And I sat down with him and we talked. It was supposed to be for a very short period of time. It turned out to be a long period of time. I said, what's the biggest problem? He said, North Korea. I had that problem worked out very quickly. It was nasty at the beginning with Rocket Man and, all the different things,
Yeah,
but
there was some epic tweets, by the way.
yeah, they
Those
were
were
no,
like
they were epic.
absolutely.
Everything he said that he has a
I-
red button on his desk. I said, I have a red button on my desk too, but my red button is much bigger, and my red button worked. And then I called him Little
yeah.
Rocket Man, if Little Rocket Man. Anyway, here's the bottom line. All of a sudden, I got a call from him, and they said they want to meet. They want to meet me, and we met.
Yeah.
As you remember, we met in Singapore. We met also in Vietnam, and I got along with them great. We were
Yeah.
in no danger. Almost double what we produce now for the whole country, if you can believe it. This was a Biden administration did something that's never been done in this country, and that's go after their political opponent, me, with this nonsense and just nonsense. In the big case in Florida, we won, but they always pick a judge, and they use local DAs. They use the local attorney generals, like Fani, Fani.
Big Fanny.
Spelled
Yeah.
Fani, Fani.
Like Fanny.
And it's
Yeah.
all a big hoax, and it's all run from there. Like in Manhattan, the one of the top people from the Justice Department went in, ran Manhattan, ran the state. The
Matthew
Letitia
Colangelo.
James deal was
Yep.
run by a person from the Department of Justice, Biden. They've
Colangelo.
never done this before,
Sure.
and they set up a very bad precedent. It's called lawfare, warfare. It's a terrible thing, and never happened in our country. It does happen
Never.
in banana republics and third world countries, but it's never
Yeah.
happened. And the incredible thing is, it actually drove my numbers up because people see, fortunately, I have a platform like you, or, in all fairness, like a conversation like this, where I can talk about it and people understand. I mean, you fight for election integrity and you end up getting indicted because you're fighting for
times.
election integrity. And when the day comes that you can't fight for election integrity, you don't have a country anymore.
Nope.
So what happens is they went after their political opponent, me. Now Biden's, close to vegetable stage, in my opinion. Okay,
Yeah.
I looked at him today on the beach and I said, why would anybody allow him? The guy could barely walk. Why would anybody allow him? Does
Yeah.
he have a political advisor that thinks this looks good? He thinks this looks good because
They don't
it looks
care.
so bad.
He's gone.
And it's
He served his
ridiculous.
purpose.
I mean, and he's been doing
Right.
that
Right.
for a long time. He can't lift the chair. The chair weighs about 3 ounces. It's meant for children and old people to lift, and he can't
Yeah.
lift it. The whole thing is crazy.
Well, I mean, he's clearly like we just don't have a president right
You
now.
don't
That's
have a
just obviously the
president, and
case.
she's going to be worse than him because she is a San Francisco liberal who destroyed San Francisco, and then as Attorney General, she destroyed California. You talk about location, and we're talking about the sun and the water and all. There's nothing better than California. She has destroyed that. She was the original DA. She was the original in
Horrible.
San Francisco. She was the original Attorney General in California. What she has
Covering up
done to
evidence.
California is, well, you know better than I do. You just left California
go.
for a lot of those reasons. And what she's done with crime, with cashless bail, where you kill somebody. I mean, we have states now, you kill somebody and they let you out right away. I mean, you don't have to even put up, and then they never find the people unless they kill again, and then they let them out again. Our
Yeah.
country is becoming a very dangerous place. And she is a radical left San Francisco liberal. And now she's trying to protect. Now she's looking like she wants to be more Trump than Trump, if that's possible. I don't think it's possible.
No tax
but
on
she wants to
tips
be
and-
more Trump than
Well,
Trump.
yeah.
I want a wall.
I think that's
She
yeah.
wants to release all the
Yeah.
prisoners that are in detention, and some of these guys are really bad.
Right.
That just came
Yeah, I
out
just saw
today.
that.
She
Yeah.
doesn't want to build the wall, even though the walls work. Walls and wheels. In your business, everything you do is obsolete. Well, not the tunnels, but everything is obsolete. Even your rocket ships. They're like a month later, they're obsolete. You find a better way to. The only thing that's not obsolete is a wall and a wheel. And the wall, I built hundreds of miles of wall, and that's why we had such good numbers. I was going to add 200
Yeah.
miles. We bought it. We could have flipped it up in 3 weeks, and they sold it for 5 cents on the dollar.
They
that
did.
meant, I said, wow, that means that they actually do want to have open borders. She wants to have open borders, and now she's going like she's tough on the border. It's such a lie.
Yeah, this is simply not
Yeah.
true. This is simply
No,
not
and
true.
everybody
Yeah,
knows
it's
it's
simply
not true.
true.
It's a disgrace that she can
Yeah.
say it.
No, I mean, obviously, what's happening sort of overnight is they're rewriting history
Yes.
and making Kamala sound like a moderate when in fact she is far left, like far, far left.
Worse than
Yes.
Bernie Sanders. She is considered
Yeah.
more liberal by far than Bernie Sanders. She's a radical left lunatic. And if she's going to be our president, very quickly, you're not going to have a country anymore. And she'll go back to all
Yeah.
of the things that she believes in. She believes in defunding the police. She believes in no fracking, zero. Now, all of a
Yeah,
sudden,
yeah.
she's
Wide
saying,
open borders.
no, I really want to see fracking. If they got in, the day she got in, she'll end fracking. And by the way, if people didn't think that, the lunatics that really believe in that, they won't vote for her. Like the Palestinians and Israel. She is so anti-Israel, and she's bad for both. Biden actually did something that was impossible. Both sides hate him. That was a hard
Yeah.
thing to do. Unification.
Yeah, no. I mean, Netanyahu came to give a talk to a joint Senate Senate and House sitting, and I was there, and Kamala stood him up. What does that say?
I
Wow.
think it's highly
That's
disrespectful.
It
And I
was.
say, if you're a Jewish person or if you believe in Israel, if you're a person that, is a very pro-Israel,
Is he going to say
if
it?
you vote for her, it's worse than Biden. And Biden was bad. But if you vote for her, you ought to have your head examined. And you see tonight, I mean, as we're doing this, I'm seeing reports coming that they
He
expect
said
an
it.
attack tonight or tomorrow from hundreds and maybe thousands of rockets. Their Iron Dome, as they call it, as we all call it, but their shield that they built, that can be swamped. We'll use a term that's
yeah,
appropriate, swamp. But they
yeah.
swamp it by shooting enough missiles. You know this better than anybody. By shooting enough missiles,
So,
they can't defend themselves. They just obliterate the whole
yeah.
place. And that's what some people think they're looking to do. And we have no leadership. There's no respect for the United States of America with these people. And I'm telling you,
Yeah.
she'll be worse than him because she's a believer
Yeah, no,
in
I
being
think you're right.
radical left, and he wasn't.
I think you're right. I mean, it's important for the public that may be listening to this to look at Kamala's track record, before the last month, and say, is that a track record you agree with? And I think if you're an independent moderate, you definitely would not agree with it because her behavior has been far left, and we're seeing just an overnight propaganda attempt to rewrite history and make it sound like Kamala's moderate when she in fact is not moderate.
They're doing a good
Well,
job.
So I
her
think that
running mate approved, signed into legislation, tampons in boys' bathrooms.
Yes.
Okay, now
yeah,
that's
yeah,
all
that's
I have
weird.
to hear. Tampons in
That's
boys'
weird.
bathrooms, and that means she
Yeah,
believes in that too. I mean,
that's
she
not
picked
okay.
this guy because he was the closest to her. A lot of people thought she'd pick sort of the opposite, but she picked an anti-Israel, radical left person. But she is far worse, they say, than Bernie Sanders. If we have her as a president, if we have a Democrat at this moment as a president, I don't think our country can survive.
I think we're in massive trouble, frankly, with the Kamala administration, and that's my honest
Yeah.
opinion. And I think really it's essential that you win for the good of the country
Heck yeah,
this
Elon.
election. And I mean, that's understating my opinion.
Great opinion.
Now, you may have seen this, but I got a letter from the EU Commission,
Yeah.
saying to not have disinformation during this discussion that we're having. And there's a lot of attempts to do censorship and to force censorship, even on Americans from other countries. And what do you think about that?
Well, I know the European Union very well. They take great advantage of the United States in trade, as you know.
Yes.
Through a different form, NATO. We protect them. And yet, if you build a car in the United States, you can't sell it in Europe. You just can't sell it. It's impossible. The same thing with our farmers. Our farmers find it very difficult to do business. We have a deficit with them of $250 billion, which people don't know. It sounds so nice, the European Union, but let me tell you, they're not as tough as China, but they're bad. And I let them know it. And that's probably why they
Good.
notified you. No, they don't treat our country well. We defend them, with Ukraine. So we're in for 250 billion and they're in for about 71 billion, and they have the same size. If you add up the European nations that, in terms of an economy, it's about the same size when you say as us. And they're at much greater risk. They're right there. We have an ocean separating us from, in this case, the enemy would be Russia. Used to be for the
Yeah.
Soviet Union, but let's assume they're close enough. And what happens is they're in for 70 something million, I think even less than that, billion. And we're in for about 250 billion, and it could be a lot higher than that. And I say, why aren't you going to equalize? Why aren't they paying what we're paying? And they're in much more important for them because of the fact that, they're right near there. I mean, they're all sort of in that location. We're not. And I did it with NATO. There were only 7 countries that were paid up in NATO out of 28 at the time. And the United States was subsidizing NATO, tremendously subsidizing NATO. And I went
Yeah.
in and I said, you
Yeah.
got to pay up. If you don't pay up, we're not going to defend you any longer. I took a lot of heat. But you know what happened? Billions and billions of dollars came flowing in. And,
Yeah, I think a lot of the public isn't aware of the fact that the United States pays a disproportionate share of the NATO expenses,
and then we get
even though,
taken advantage of on trade. So think
yeah,
about it.
well, I mean, the point of NATO is defending Europe. It's like, okay, well, why is the United States paying disproportionately more to defend Europe than Europe? That doesn't make sense. That's unfair, and that is an appropriate thing to address.
Yeah. Great
Well,
question.
when you talk about
So,
cost cutting and savings and everything else, I mean, honestly,
Put that on the
look, there's
list.
nobody that feels worse about the Ukraine situation than I do because I know it would have never happened. I know Zelensky. He was very honorable to me because when they went with the Russia hoax and they said I had a phone call with him, he said it was a perfect phone call. It was a great phone call. He could have grandstanded and, said, oh, he was very threatening. He said, no, it was a very nice phone call. I called him up to congratulate him on his win, and you end up getting impeached because these people are
yeah, yeah,
lunatics.
They're
I
lunatics.
was talking about the difference from the people within and the enemies on the outside. In many cases, the people people from within are more dangerous for our country
The
than
enemy
the
within.
Russians and the Chinas. Now, they've taken advantage
Yeah,
of us
absolutely.
incredibly, but you're going to do things with the right person. We need a man or person who's unbelievably sharp in order to stop all the nuclear danger and all the dangers that I'm talking about. And I got along with all these. I got along with Kim Jong-un. We had dinner, we had everything. And he really liked me, and I got along with him really well. By the way, he's the absolute boss over there. A lot of people said, oh, do you think he really?
That's for
Let me
sure.
tell you, I saw things that you don't want to know about. He is the boss. But we had a good relationship, and he doesn't like Biden. He considers him a stupid man, he said. He's a stupid man. Well, at least he speaks his mind.
Yeah, it's true.
But, in this country, you're not sort of allowed to say it, but I guess you are. You should be allowed to say it if
Yeah,
it's true. But we need smart people, and we need people that have an ability to lead. And she doesn't have that ability. Can you imagine? Now,
yeah.
Chairman Xi very well. Can you imagine her and him negotiating or
No, it's
even
silly. It would be
standing
silly.
together?
It would be
It is,
silly.
the whole concept
Yeah.
is ridiculous. She is terrible, but she's getting a free ride. I
It
saw a
would.
picture of her
Yeah, yeah.
on Time
Silly.
Magazine today. She looks like the most beautiful actress ever to live.
Such a good
It was a
word.
drawing.
I mean, with all these things, I always try to get to the ground truth by just asking people. And my mom lives in New York. I was like, Mom, any of your friends, been attacked or assaulted? And she said, yeah, three of her friends in three separate
Crazy.
incidents were assaulted just in recent months, just walking around the streets of New York. And I said, well, what happened to the people that assaulted them? Oh, nothing. They got away. They just
They
know that.
always get
No,
away.
they didn't even bother reporting it because people are not going to get prosecuted. They just let violent criminals out in New York
The only one
with
that gets
zero bail.
prosecuted is Donald Trump. They prosecute Trump.
Yeah, I mean it's
Yeah, or the
it's
guy
it's
who
just
tries to
obviously
stop the
messed up
mugger
Oh,
on
it's
the
terrible.
if
subway.
violent criminals are being getting off scot
Yep.
free, and meanwhile, New York's spending massive resources prosecuting you. Sensible public looks at this and says, "What the heck's going on here? This is obviously abuse of the legal system. The legal system is supposed to be protecting the
That's right.
public from violent criminals, and it should be obviously allowing the public to make their own decision about who should be president, as opposed to some legal case."
Once they start this precedent, because this can go on with the next one. I mean, this is a very bad precedent, what they're doing in terms of, going after their political opponent. And that's all it is. It's going after their political opponent. And then you get a judge who's, a strong Democrat. And I'm being nice when I say that, in many cases, crooked as hell. But you get a judge and you go into an area where a Republican gets 3 or 4% of the vote. And, you'll have a jury pool
Yeah,
with people that hate Republicans or hate. It could
sure,
also be the other way, though,
of course,
because it could start the other way in areas where they hate
exactly.
Democrats. And you get into a
Yep.
Pandora's box. It's a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
dangerous thing for
Well, we're ready for that
this
to happen.
country, and a very dangerous thing even for the state. New York
Absolutely.
City and state lose a lot of business over what they did to me, because these people say, we don't want that to happen to us. That's no justice system. You have an unfair system of
Yes.
justice, and it's costing New York State a tremendous amount of money. People are leaving and companies are leaving, and they won't come back. So, all of that stuff is important. But the economy now is the big thing, and we can turn that economy up so fast, and people are going to be back again. We're going to get rid of
Yeah, I
inflation.
think there's a lot of
Right.
opportunity. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, I'd just like to note to people listening, like, I've not been very political before. And if you look at my record, I'm not like, sometimes they try to paint me as like a far right guy, which is absurd because I'm like making electric vehicles and,
Right.
solar and batteries
Saving the
helping the
planet.
environment. And I actually,
They don't care about that.
I supported Obama. I stood in line for 6 hours to shake Obama's hand when he was running for president. And, so it's not like I'm like some sort of
Why?
dyed in the wool long-term Republican. I call myself, historically a moderate Democrat. But now I feel like we're really at a critical juncture for the country. And, I think a lot of people thought Biden administration would be a moderate administration, but it's not. And obviously that we're just going to see an even further left administration with Kamala. That's my honest opinion. I mean, her dad is literally, I mean, she was brought up as an actual, dad is a Marxist economist. You can Google it. We're not making this up, That's how she was brought up. And we
Yes.
want to have a future that is prosperous. I think we're just at this critical juncture. And I think this is a case of America is going to at a fork in the road. And I think it will take, if like you are the path to prosperity, and I think Kamala is the opposite. I mean, that's my honest opinion. I'm gonna get attacked like crazy, and I've also experienced quite a bit of lawfare myself.
No kidding.
And I'm just
Even tonight.
trying to tell people my honest opinion. And I haven't been really active in politics before, and I'm just trying to point out that my track record historically has been moderate, if not moderate, slightly left. So this is to people out there who are in the moderate camp to say, I think you should support Donald Trump for president. I think it's actually a very important junction in the road, and we're in deep trouble if it goes the other way.
Well, I want to thank you. And, I actually always did think of you as somewhat left. I must say that. So it's
Yeah.
even more of an
Well,
honor to
yeah.
have your endorsement. I know how strong you feel about it. But, when you think of her, San Francisco, 15 years ago, I had a great friend, Bob Tish. He said it's the greatest city in America. And now it's almost not livable there. And California, likewise. And she was involved in the destruction destruction of San Francisco and the destruction of California. And she will be involved in the destruction of our country if people are so unwise as to elect her. And I hope that doesn't happen. And I hope the elections are going to be run honestly. And we're going to turn this country around, and we can do it fairly quickly. And we have to get rid of the criminals that have been, given to us by other countries as they laugh. They laugh at
Yeah.
us. They think we're stupid to accept these people. These are radical, stone cold killers in many cases and terrorists. And they're in our country by the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And we have to take
Yeah.
them out.
Yeah. I mean, if I could summarize it, perhaps, I think these are issues that I think most people in America would agree with, which is that we want safe and clean cities. We want secure borders. We want sensible government spending. We
Yes.
want to restore both the perception and reality of respect in the judicial system,
Yes.
stop the
Go,
lawfare.
Elon.
And how are those even right-wing positions? I think that's just common sense. I mean, would you agree with that?
100%. I don't understand, the whole, they call it progressive. They don't like the word liberal anymore, but call it liberal or progressive. I don't understand how somebody could say that it's okay for them to empty prisons into our country. And again, I told you, their
Yeah,
crime rates
definitely
all
not
over the world
okay.
are going way down, which makes sense. In fact, the next time what we'll do is if something happens with this election, which would be a horror show, we'll meet the next time in Venezuela because it'll be a far safer place to meet than our country, okay? So we'll go, you and I will go and we'll have a meeting and dinner in Venezuela because that's what's happening. Their crime rate's coming down and our crime rate's going through the roof, and it's so simple. And you haven't seen anything yet because these people have come into our country and they're just getting acclimated, and they don't know about being politically correct law enforcement or lack of law enforcement. And our police, I have to just end with this, we have great police, we have great law enforcement, but they're not allowed to do their job. They have to be able to do their
Yeah.
job without being destroyed.
Well, it's obviously demoralizing if you're a police officer risking your life to arrest
Right. Why would you
violent
work in
criminals
Why would
who
you
could
work in
kill you
San
and do kill you
Francisco
sometimes.
or Oakland?
And then you arrest the violent criminal, and then the DA, doesn't prosecute and
Right.
they just let the guy out.
Right.
Well, then, like,
Why would you
why
do
should a
it?
police officer risk their life to arrest a violent felon
Well, even worse,
if
Elon,
nothing's going to happen?
even worse, they prosecute the police officer and they take away his pension.
Right.
They take away his
Yeah.
job. He loses his family. He
Defund the
loses
police,
his house.
racist.
Well, I thought it was very telling, like incredibly telling, that, when there was that case where, sort of a gang of thugs beat up police officers, I think it was in Times
Yep.
Square in New York, and then nothing happened to those guys.
Nope.
They were let out, zero bail, and I think a bunch of them were given free
Alvin
tickets to
Bragg.
California. That is a gross indignity against the United States, and this is insane. Like, have we lost all pride? How
Yeah.
can such a thing be allowed to occur?
I've never seen anything.
You know?
We see where they get shot. It's a very dangerous profession, but it's something they're very proud of, and they want to be able to do their job. But I've seen them get shot. I've seen a lot of things. But I've never seen where these guys are standing in the middle of a big street, everybody watching them, and they're literally boxing, like punching, stand up fighting a police officer. There were two of them, and you
Yeah.
had about six
Yeah,
of
yeah.
these guys, and they're punching the hell out of them. And in their own country, they would be dead if they did that. They'd be shot.
Yeah.
They would be shot instantly.
Not in
And
America.
they come from these countries, and it's taking them a while to realize that we don't do that in this country. But in their own
Yeah.
country, if they stood on a street and had a fight with a police officer, they would be shot. There's no political correctness, and it's such a sad thing to see. And that's the reason you have crime, by the way,
Yeah.
because we don't do anything about
Yeah,
it.
we just cannot have a situation where our police officers are beaten up on camera by, a gang of illegal immigrants, and then nothing happens to the guys who beat up the cops. I mean, and they're let out. This is
Well, we're going to
unacceptable.
change it, and we're going to get them out of the country. When I first got involved, they said you couldn't get them back to these countries. You couldn't take them back. In the case of Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, some others, you couldn't get them back. And I said, really? Oh, you can't get them back? Because under Obama, he couldn't get them back. They'd fly them in, and they'd put planes on the runways in these countries so you couldn't land a plane. They'd bring them back. And the generals told me, sir, we can't bring them back. The countries won't accept MS-13 gang members. They won't accept them. And I said, really, how much do we pay these various countries in terms of economic aid, which is also somewhat ridiculous? And the answer was $750 million. I said, good. Tell them they're in default, delinquent. We're not paying them anymore because they won't accept
yeah,
it.
it's
And you know what happened? They all called me,
yeah,
every
yeah,
one of them. We would be honored to take them back, sir.
Of
We would
course,
be
of
honored.
course.
It was so easy. But it's one of those things. And we got it back. The MS-13 is probably
yeah,
the worst gangs in the world. They're the most vicious, violent. We took them out of here by the thousands and got them out of here. And their countries took them back. And because I said, you're not getting any more economic aid. And once I said that, they wouldn't take them back for
yeah,
Obama. They
yeah.
wouldn't take them back for anybody. And now we have a problem because we have this guy, and they don't take him back anymore with Biden because they don't
Well
respect
done.
him. I really appreciate this. Has been, to me, it's been a lot of fun being with you.
Heck
You're
yeah.
an amazing guy. You've done an incredible job and a great inspiration to people. I hope you keep going and just continue continue to do well. And we're going to have a big election coming up. And I think November 5th will be the most important day in the history of our country. I think that election will be the most important election. And I think it'll end up being maybe the most important day in the history of our country, because if
Yeah.
we don't win, I just feel so sorry for everybody.